Здравствуйте, дорогие друзья. Мы начинаем.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. We begin our public talk, whose title is, I will read it. Our public talk is Tablet Against Bad Mood, who will be not helped by antidepressants. So we will decide what can help them or not. I am Mikhail Horst, head of Doctor TV channel, clinical psychologist, writer. Let me introduce our guests. I'm sure you've seen Dmitry Shamenkov many times today. He's a doctor, physiologist, expert in family medicine and conscious management of health, entrepreneur and public person. Alexander Yerechev, psychotherapist, PhD in medical sciences, lead fellow in National Medical Center for Psychiatry and Neurology, named by Bekhterev. We will be done by 6 p.m. So 20 minutes or 15 minutes to 6, we will have a Q&A session. So our experts and myself will take those questions. Dear friends, we begin. My first question is to Alexander. In recent times, we hear words like, I have a depression, I have a hard time living. How much do these words that we hear in life coincide with clinical depression? And what is clinical depression? This is not an easy question. Let me start by saying that most statements like this, when people say, I have a depression because I had an argument with my wife and I've had bad mood for 3 hours, does not mean that a person has a depression. A depression is when you have bad mood for about 2 weeks and it combines with low interest to life, and when the previous things that made you feel happy do not make you feel happy any longer. When a person negatively treats himself or herself, when concentration of attention goes down, sleep disorders, troubles going to sleep or waking up, suicidal thoughts, low appetite, pronounced low appetite, pains, sometimes chest pains. What about increased appetite? May it indicate depression? Yes, it may also indicate that a person has an impression, but there are a lot of varieties of depressions. Women sometimes have more appetite when they are depressed, and sometimes people start eating when he or she is in a bad mood, and eats more and more by doing this. Sometimes there are more pronounced clinical conditions like heavy depressions, when a person may not be able to get up from bed, maybe not moving at all. So the range of the definitions of depression is very wide. Depression can be a standalone illness or maybe an element of the overall illness of a person. Dmitry, the question is, who is more susceptible to depressions, urban citizens or rural citizens? And why do we see depression conditions going up, the amount of them going up? Yes, let me join Alexander by saying that depression is a serious diagnosis. And when we speak about different conditions, well, we can say there are dystomies, mood disorders. This is the thing that is defined as depression, mood disorders. So let us separate two things. Depression is a clinical condition with high suicidal risks. But to answer your question, to be honest, I'm more oriented on evidence-based medicine, and I can't remember any publications analyzing whether there are more depressed people in rural areas or in cities and towns. Let me share my practical experience, and my experience is very interesting. I lived in Moscow for a long time, and then I lived in Thailand, in Pangao Island, for 7 years. It's paradise on the earth, but a lot of people come there, and I took care of psychological well-being of people there for a long time. I also live at Bali and in mountainous Altai. But I did visit Singapore or Kuala Lumpur, being big cities. There is a big myth saying that there is more depression somewhere and that depression depends on environment. Or when you live on an island, paradise-like island, I couldn't see that people were more happy than if they lived elsewhere in the world. I think a lot depends on the social community surrounding that person. So the social environment, let's take Pangai Island. There is a Buddhist community there, and Thailand is a Buddhist country. Buddhism is a social arrangement. So a monastery is a certain environment with people united by a uniform practice or way of living. If we look at different studies, for instance, Blue Zones, written by Dan Buettner about longevity and places where people live longer, we can say that, for instance, in Okinawa, people live longer. Or if we take the Seventh-day Adventists, so when people have a meaning in life, they have less depression. So when you come to Thailand or to Bali, why do people like coming there? Because people do have certain living practices and social practices, and those practices are not diluted. And when they live in those practices, they're filled with love, with contact, with light, and it is very nice communicating with those people. And this environment affects you in a good way. On the one hand, a person can improve environment, but on the other hand, environment influences us a lot. And a lot of studies prove this. So environment plays a bigger role. So it's not about where you live or who you live with, who you share your life with. Alexander, please. Yes, let me comment a little bit. Yes, I agree with Mitri, but let me comment some things. Yes, it is considered that urban citizens are depressed more, but there are several moments here. One is that maybe they're diagnosed better. So if a person lives in a village, in a remote place, and he has no access to a psychiatrist, it is hard to diagnose depression. This is one point. Another point is there are hypotheses with certain substantiation saying that the growth of depression is due to the fact that we have fewer emotionally rich communications with the family, with neighbors, with other important people in our lives, and the level of stress goes up constantly. Digitalization is a good thing on the one hand. On the other hand, digitalization may mean a replacement of a real human communication. But this depressed condition or pre-depression condition, is it a consequence of higher stress, more stress in our lives? Well, this is a multifactorial model. Once we talk about depression as a clinical phenomenon, as a medical phenomenon, then there is a difference between healthy people and sick people. Also, there are a lot of people who are between being healthy and sick. And this contribution is very different. Well, it may be the action of genetics or of the stress factors, we used to diagnose more neurotic depression related to inner conflict, and so-called endogenic depressions, where environmental impact is higher. All in all, we can say that there is a saying that, well, there are no strong people, there are low-quality tortures. Well, the level of stress differs a lot. Stress is an abstract concept. What is stress? Stress is when our psychological willingness to react to something is in one condition, and it is influenced by environment. Some people may not be too much stressed when he or she is fired from work, or a person may not be too much stressed with family issues, and other people may be more stressed. So in other words, people being in the same situation may be stressed differently, may react differently, or maybe even happy taking some stress as opposed to others. For instance, in some cultures, people are happy when their family members die. Death is a bad thing on the one hand, but people just sing and they play the drums, and they're happy that their relatives have died because they have a different attitude and understanding of death. So my teacher, Richard Lazarus, proved it scientifically that stress is not a consequence of stress factors. Stress is not a consequence. Stress and also depression are not a consequence of some events in life. Stress is not a consequence of a given situation. Stress is whether we conflict with the environment or not. So, and you can educate yourself, and parents can also train their kids how to deal with inner conflict and how to deal with stress. Let me also add by saying that we have missed one more factor that influences depression, being childhood experiences. Sometimes it is criticized that we look into childhood too much, but at the same time, if a person is not capable of satisfying his or her psychological needs in childhood, maybe when parents are unable to interact with their child well, this predetermines possible future depressions. It may cause physical deprivation, or physical deprivation in childhood may have long-term consequences. Also, I have noticed that recently I see a lot of mothers taking their kids who are 20, 25 or even 30 years old, who are very knowledgeable and smart people who speak foreign languages, but their level of socialization is at the level of 15 or 16-year-olds. And those children, or those young adults, are depressed. And one of the reasons for young adult depression is this this method of educating or bringing up children with too much love. Too much love may be the cause of depression, no matter how strange it may sound. So one extreme is when children are not punished, they are not put in under any restrictions. Yes, let me also comment. Now, let me finish first. So children who were not punished, who didn't face any restrictions, when they come to the real world with very strong competition, with aggression, with certain limitations, they get depressed. Yes, let me say another thing. I have 4 kids of different ages. So we have lived through a lot of different things with them. I hear stories like yours many times in life. Yes, depression doesn't come out of the blue. There is biological predisposition, but also the role of the social buffer in this process. Well, those with a strong social buffer, they can dampen depression or stress. So the stronger the buffer is, the better his or her relations are with the outer world. So there is the high probability that the person will not develop depression, even if a person is put under strong stress. So the way we live through stress is very important. And also social interactions with other people are important to resist depression. Martin Seligman, a famous psychiatrist, speaks about this a lot. When adult people turn out to be helpless, bringing up without limitation is bringing up without feedback. So I'm against violence. I was in situations when, with my eldest son, I beat him a little bit, but then I apologized, and I was really upset about it, and I shared my frustration with him. But I'm against certain things. For instance, I don't want my children walking at home in shoes or boots that she wears out in the street. I'm against violence, but I want my children to follow certain rules. So, for instance, my son sometimes wanted to sleep in the street on a terrace, and I wasn't against it, and I could discuss different things with him. Another important thing is that the size of a family is very important. When there are a lot of people in the family, we need to agree, and we need to negotiate. Sometimes there are families with 1 child. Yes, indeed. So young adults are susceptible to depression more if they're only children in their families. Yes, but this is disputable. On the one hand, it is hard to spoil a child with overly love. On the other hand, in recent years, people start saying that one of the emotional needs of a child is to shape adequate borders. In other words, if we satisfy all needs and desires of a child, then most probably that person will then face with a different environment at school, and what will he or she face? He will probably be bullied, because that person will not be able to understand why I cannot get what I want to. And then it will lead to a depressed condition. And this will be a reaction to the environment, which was quite unexpected for that child. But I won't define it as the #1 reason for developing depression. Yes, indeed, this is the trouble of our times. When parents lived in a worse condition and they try to provide better condition to their child, they sometimes overdo it. But it's not about depression, it's more about issues with socialization and interaction with other people, with other kids.
I entered school when I was 5, and I changed a big number of schools, 7 like that, 8 like that, and I have always been the main object for, for bullying and for fighting in school. You come there, you're 2 years younger than everybody, and I had good marks and I had good results, and I have been a newbie very often, but I managed to figure it out quite soon because there were no other options. And I would like to pay special attention about learned incapacity to do something. When a person is reaching 18 years old and they say, all right, you are the grown up, and he has to find somebody who would define how to live, because it turns out that the world is different, and other affiliated systems like schools who are aimed at creating a perfect environment, it's unreal. And we have friends who grow in a child and they say, okay, we need a school. They make best schools for the child to go there, and then after move into the US, and they get into the real environment, and they find out that the child cannot adapt himself. So if we take intermediate results, so not only morbid, not only soft power is in place, but something as hard is needed. It should be a harmonical. When we award and punish and limit our children, and any extreme, either to softness or to hardness, brings to stress and depression. We're moving on. For the happiness pills, dear comrades, make it clear to me, there is... are you speaking about drugs now? Well, we have, our topic is antidepressants. Antidepressants are the pills which work in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of use, and tranquilizers give immediate effect, and the risks of addiction is quite high. Speaking about antidepressants, if you drink alcohol twice a day or once a day, only 3 or 4 weeks, you would find out that your mood becomes smoother than psychological addiction to drugs will not be your case. As for antidepressants, this is a very good situation to remove the high degree of concern or anxiety, but it's a real easy group to hide behind, group of drugs. I feel bad, I take this drug, I take this pill. It can be used, but also under supervision of a doctor, and antidepressants work in the same way. Next question. Do the drugs have to be the pills have to be selected individually? Obviously, it's a must, because the goal of an expert, both of the psychotherapist and psychiatric, is to make individual testing, individual diagnosis. I will take it broadly, because a person might have some problems which with thyroid gland, but it will look like a depression, and to figure out what is happening with him, you need some experience and some expertise. And in order to select antidepressants, sometimes people come with a suppressed mood, spirit. With psychotherapy or psychological correction would help them a lot, but they request drugs, they request medicine, because they want to. And if a person has severe depression, probably can think that psycho correction can work rapidly. And antidepressants are numerous, and they have their own side effects and negative consequences. That's why training of experts requires up to 8 years. What is the probability to be addictive to antidepressants? Physical dependence or physical addiction is not formed from the majority of antidepressants, because it happens with those which are used unpurposefully and in a wrong manner, and these they start to control it. in a more strict manner. They are not in free rotation, free access. Without a recipe from a doctor, without a prescription, a person cannot just come to the pharmacy and buy it, because it will be a self-prescription, like antibiotics are prescribed, self-prescribed. And then, like in arts experiment, red pressing button with electrode, dopamine extraction. Pressing button is more about drugs, about narcotics, not about antidepressants. We have to support my colleague, and I'm often asked that sometimes people really need it badly, and people are afraid, because obviously there are certain logics in combining therapies. I'm basically against considering pharmacotherapy separately. If it's a pharmacotherapy, you definitely need psychotherapy without any doubt, and social factors have to be addressed as well. Then the combination through this complex training, you can change the quality of life in a foreseeable period of time, and to refuse some type of therapy in the future. But you have to say it out loud, and I can hear it quite often. Very often it's the self-cancellation of therapy. If a doctor prescribed you antidepressant, there is no way you should not cancel it your own. You should not stop taking it on your own, only after the psychiatric, because it can result in suicide and something else. Yeah, sometimes people quit. And I absolutely agree with you, because despite I am involved in psychotherapy and I am involved for many years, at the same time I perfectly understand that brigade model, team model is really important when the roles and responsibilities are divided properly, and to understand what is happening with the person. People rarely try to repair cars on their own, but they're trying to repair themselves on their own. Why not? In Finland, they made a special model of open dialogue in psychiatry. Social workers, friends, psychiatrists, together with the patients, were discussing their condition, share their emotions, and reduce the time for being an inmate patient 10 times, tenfold. And now I can see that two prospective drugs, esketamine, it will be a spray, nasal spray, and the second one is with psilocybin. And they launched it really well, because the first research which showed great potential of that elements of that medicine, but we do not have sufficient basis in this country to develop neuropharmacology. And I was participating in the orders from the government. That's why the industry is not working for us to be the first in the world. We have to do something on our own. But don't lose spirit. It's a good news. There is good news. There is always a way out. I would give the floor to colleagues, because I probably went too far into that. And the next question is, we know, or we think we know, that in the West, the doctors and are awarded by pharmaceutical companies when doctors prescribe these or that medicine. We see in the movies and in the series and and it is introduced like an average norm to take antidepressants. And a few years ago, most of us did not even hear about this wonder pills, magic pills. Isn't the interest to depression or antidepressant pills? Isn't it a viral trend, social trend, which is launched via books, via movies, via series, and so on and so forth? I think it's a conspirological theory, and it has low ground behind itself. Depressive situations, depressive condition are very widespread in the society. And if we take our situation, an average person is going to the expert not in a strict way, losing a few years of his productive life. And this condition becomes chronic quite often. And I think that destigmatization is the priority. That's a very common problem which can appear in every family. In a 5-story building, there will be a few people who are suffering depression right now. And medicine, on the other hand, is developing due to major giants, pharmaceutical companies. That's why this power on its own should not be denied. There is no doing it. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. When a person understands, after getting into a hard emotional condition, he understands he can ask for help and understand what's happening. Because the barriers, the obstacles are on the face that a person feels bad. And it's hard to turn for help. And he says, no, am I mad? Am I a psycho? And his relatives say that, come on, stiff upper lip, let's do it. I was fired from a job, I was depressed, stiff upper lip and everything went fine. And if a person is depressed, can feel helpless, and it can even lead to a suicide. Well, of course, the situations are different. We have to, with the U.S., we have to understand that maybe we have underestimation of the condition of psychological sphere in the psychiatric sphere in the country. But as for the United States, we have serious problems there. We have big legal markets of opioids, Transcontinental, which is an epidemic of drug addicts. It's a huge problem, a large-scale problem. Antidepressants are not even close. Clinics of pain killing. Marijuana was legalized. I just want to deliver one common thing. There is a normal physiological situation of a human being. Academician Sudakov, he made the following definition: is the condition of optimal life being with positive emotional tone and art implementation self-definition. It's a normal situation. I wake up, I feel good. I should not be in the ecstasy, which is very often confused, like I'm always high. I'm not like always high. I'm just okay. I'm just fine. That's the norm. And if I'm out of this norm, we have to take a complex of measures to get back to this. To have bipolar vibrations. And I regulate myself for the evening, and I have such friends. They take tranquilizers in the evening. In the morning, they take some Adderall in the morning in order to, like a legal ecstasy in pills, to wake them up on prescription of psychotics. But people live like that. And this exterior prosthetic, so to say, because the living system have their self-regulation. Every action provokes counteraction, which is stronger than that. Sooner or later, I will have addiction. I will get used to it. It will not be an addiction, but I will get used to it, and it will require extra correction of my condition. Some people are trying to correct themselves with this exterior prosthetics. Maybe it should be prescribed or not prescribed. What are the main markets worldwide? This is food, excessive fast food, sugar-containing liquids, legal markets of alcohol, all this smoking, all this stuff. The legal and illegal drugs. They cannot call it drugs, can call it narcotics actually, but most people can consider them being narcotics. And weapons, because when you are pissed off every day, 24/7, and this stress is considered a regular norm of life, people want to protect themselves, to compensate that, because living in this stress, there's no living in such stress. But that's generally a problem of society, and we're burning the land for because it's not enough. This consumerism is going forward because I have to buy something new, something else. I have a comrade who made the Smart Shock clinics, he's speaking about the syndrome of deficiency of satisfaction deficiency, Jinbu, this basic unsatisfaction with life as one of the key drivers of dependence and addiction. That's why I want to focus your attention that in general, the society, it is important via education or some other mechanism. It is important to establish a mechanism of contact of a human being with each other. There's epidemics of social isolation. Social networks are in place, but going to social media, there was a research of Pennsylvania University, a huge research, which showed that going into social media, a person becomes even more lonely by 30–40% comparing to those who restrain themselves from doing so. Going through the Facebook or Instagram, we have certain positive Vanity Fair pictures, and if a person has some probability and has some disease to provoke even worse situation, he is more vulnerable to that. So we have to denormalize the outer self-regulation of your condition, because it's not abnormal if you take something every day in order to feel okay. You have to think about it. You're going in the wrong way. Maybe you need some psychotherapy or to learn something. You have to do something with that. At the same time, you have to understand that drugs and medicine like antidepressants and this short interventions in the hands of qualified experts are needed to shift the situation, shift the condition in a quality manner. And I would like to say from my side, I have to say that you have to allow yourself to feel bad. We woke up, we feel bad, and people start to being nervous. What's wrong with that? I'm born for happiness. I have to be fine. I have to take something, to do something in order to solve the problem. No, guys, we're human. We can be happy. We can be joyful. We can feel grief, sorrow, sadness, maybe unexplicable, sometimes explicable. And when we allow ourselves to be different, those secondary troubles are not popping up. We are not sad. We're sad because we're not sad. Now we're living through something. We're worried about something, but we read 10,000 books where it is said that we should not be worried about that. That being worried is bad. That we have to be coaches and motivation speakers. That we should all be in motivated results. My friend has written a song which says, "Don't worry. These people are lying. We can get worried." You know, I really want to support you indeed. This is one of the fundamental problems, taboo on feelings, taboo on complicated feelings, multi-layer, multifaceted feelings, because there is such a model. The person feels joy and the full stop, like it's a linear sensation, like it's a linear feeling. And we have open dialogue school where people share their worries and their emotions. And when I feel joy and somebody else nearby is feeling pain next to me, and for example, I co-feel this pain and I feel ashamed to that. It's not a linear feeling; it's a complicated feeling. This is what is called emotional intellect. Develop your emotional intellect. Learn to feel. Learn to allow yourself to feel, and to try to guess what other people think. We can never do it 100%, but trying to explain to ourselves why do they feel that, why do they feel so. It's really good for your communicative skills and for an efficient life in the real society. And I would like to add a few words about a separate phenomena which was actively examined. This is a so-called pathological perfectionism. On one hand, we're striving for higher standards. On the other hand, when you get joy from working from achieving results, and on the other hand, society programs us, to be ever young, ever happy, ever successful. Just take a look on the Instagram, and it's all happening there. And as clients very often say, when I am depressed to the maximum, my pictures on Instagram are the best. So pathological perfectionism is a situation when a person, the expectations of a person and the goals are extremely high, and he can hardly jump up to that and reach it. and he gets used to putting them higher and higher and higher. And he feels a short-time satisfaction after achieving that. And now this phenomena is a separate phenomena. It has been examined. It's a pre-factor for quite healthy people, for them to get into a negative condition, chronical suppressed depressed condition, and the person is chronically depressed, he is unsatisfied with his car, his health is not good enough, and emotions are not constant.
And this worsens the situation. At Harvard University, there is a famous course by a professor who wrote a book, Paradox of a Perfectionist. So when you are charged with a lot of goals, you may no longer feel happy when you reach your goal, because your understanding of achievement is different from what the achievement really is. So the person may waste his or her life creating a success model. Yes, indeed. So a systemic sign of addiction is dissatisfaction without any clear reason or condition. So we charge ourselves with success, but on the other hand, we are doomed, feeling uncomfortable without this success. Neurotic perfectionism is a very popular term nowadays in psychiatry and psychology. Do you have any advice for being resourceful all the time? Well, if we allow ourselves to be sad or depressed for a while, so what should we do next? Should we go to a doctor immediately or try to heal yourself? Well, if you have an opportunity to go to a doctor, go. I don't know how much a consultation costs, but usually it is expensive to get a qualified consultation. In Moscow, you can get help from the city government and healthcare. So, but if you can go to a doctor, do it. In general, let me say that. So the main issue is like this. I was depressed myself for a year. Every year I woke up and wanted to commit suicide every morning. So I lost money at that point of time, and I took certain drugs and alcohol. So in that period of my life, I didn't know what to do. I felt really bad, and my family fell apart, so a lot of bad things happened at the same time. What helped me was the understanding that everything is about perception. If I resist life, if I do not live my life, I worsen my condition. So deep acceptance of your life was the first step towards healing. Living through those feelings and sufferings helped me feel or get a reward. So accepting the current moment was very rewarding. So you can do that on your own, or with a therapist, or with a peer. So this acceptance help overcome bad feelings. Another comment would be about commitment or some internal honesty. When you follow or stick to your values. So it is hard to explain this in 5 minutes. It's not for public talk, but honesty became a starting point for me to normalize my social interactions and to get better, to improve my condition. I believe in resourceful condition. Mikhail wrote about it in the book Psychology of Optimal Feelings. So there are a lot of studies and books covering this subject. Also, psychiatry books, third wave of cognitive therapies. There is Katie Byron. So a huge amount of books and methods helping achieve this resourceful condition. There are also conscious condition practices. I was a Buddhist monk at some point of time, and I exercised those Buddhist practices of meditation, which could also be very helpful. It's important for a person not to be alone. He or she should be in some environment providing certain support. If this support is professional, it is even better. But it sounds like a circle, like a vicious circle. You keep saying that environment plays a big role for a person to heal from depression. Imagine a person who is not in a resourceful condition, he's depressed, he's not surrounded by people, so he cannot enter this friendly environment. It's like with sleep disorders. There is a model. For instance, a person doesn't sleep well, cannot fall into sleep. The most traumatic thought is that if he or she sleeps badly, he or she will have a bad day next day. So you need to get rid of this thought to be able to fall asleep. Researchers say that healthy sleep is critical. So on the one hand, as we deal with people, we face different paradoxes like this. That's why socialization, contacts and human interaction, all these things are very important. But it is also important for a person to understand that it is always possible to find something in your own condition or inside you, to rely on it. So for a person to be in a difficult situation or in a difficult condition, what advice would I give to him or her? When I was in a depressed condition, I gave myself certain time to be bad, to be depressed, to be in low spirits, and those moments of acceptance and allowing yourself to be that way helped me a lot, helped me to breathe better. So in other words, you did not criticize yourself for criticizing yourself. Of course, it wasn't easy. I kept criticizing myself, but I took attempts to accept myself and my feelings. It has been observed that people often devalue their achievements, and this prevents them from getting into that resourceful state or condition. They say to themselves, if I haven't achieved all I have planned, I haven't done anything. So this generalization, when people say, like musketeers, everything or nothing. If you want to fall in love with the queen. It's the same as just seeing like money lying on the ground, and you see it and you think, I'd love to see more of this money. If I found more, I would take it. So, or if you wait for an elevator, you decide there is no elevator, I will walk upstairs step by step. So if you allow yourself to develop step by step, or even allow yourself to fall down and then go upstairs once again, this understanding of, or knowing that yes, you may lose something, and but you will be able to recover and go up, and maybe the elevator will arrive at a good point. It's good that we're having such a heated discussion. Let me separate several stages. So one stage is when a person is slightly depressed or anxious. The second stage of depression is when the person is depressed, and when you say to a person, be resourceful, believe in yourself, this only exacerbates depression and may lead to very negative impacts. It's great when we can develop the so-called resilience. It is great when we can communicate better with people or spend time with important people, significant people in our lives. But the goal of psychotherapy is to bring a person to his or her values and goals. This is the super goal of psychotherapy. How you do it, it depends on the strategy. But when a person is depressed, first we fight the bad things. So if a person is not depressed, we can focus on good things. But if a person is already depressed, we should help him get rid of bad things. For instance, people say, I don't think I'll be able to do it. I do very little. I criticize myself for it. And I'm not planning big things that I could have done. So at this stage, it is good that a person start planning small things without expecting to be successful in those small steps. Let me also add one thing. It is important to explain to yourselves, or if you're an expert, explain to a patient that there are no small things. It is hard to define a big thing or a small thing in life. So when people say a small thing, it means something smaller than they expected. But something that's smaller than you expected and a small thing are two different concepts. One more thing, and then I will hand over to Dmitry. Another important point is the so-called rumination, the thinking, chewing gum. So people or a person thinks, how come it has happened to me? What has happened? How has I come to this situation? This may happen to a depressed person or to a person in a normal condition. So people think they criticize themselves for a good reason. You can make a test. If you can make a conclusion from the situation you are in, then focus on it. If you just criticize yourself and worsen your mood even more, then you should fight it. Then you need maybe certain techniques and methods or ways to stop this criticism. It is good that Dmitry shared his experience of being depressed. When experts share their personal experience, this helps their patients get better. Yes. Thank you for sharing this point about willpower. I was at a session where athletes spoke, and I tried to explain that this model doesn't always help. Yes, when you're resourceful, it's good, but when you are depressed, the way I felt, I couldn't open my eyes, so I couldn't think about doing any sport. So it was hard for me to get up from bed and go to the washroom. So this was really serious. So it is hard for a normal person to understand it. Normal people would say, this is not true, you are just fooling around. But this is not the case. Yes, behavioral activation could help here. I agree with Alexander. And let me mention an interesting study that could help us make those small steps. I understand that small is a very relative concept, and also about exercises and fitness. How much can this help in curing depression? So recent studies show that even 50 minutes of exercising, jogging or walking, could help us reduce the risk of premature death by 37%. And the length of this physical activity or the intensity of this activity does not influence the longevity, but But even if we take a walk every day for 10 minutes, it will contribute to your good condition. I'm sure people listening to us, they already hate us because they know they should do it, but they don't do it. They know it, they don't do it because they don't have resources, not physical resources, but inner resources. Because of sadness, anxiety, irritation, feeling of guilt, or frustration. Yes, I agree. If you are depressed, first reduce the intensity of those negative conditions, and only then work on improving your spirits. Also about physical activity and exercising. What helped me when I was depressed, and I actually found the substantiation for my conclusions in different studies, so everyday activities, if you do this, like cooking food or like mopping the floor, could help you go back on track. So this physical activity that produces good results can help you improve your condition. So Lancet published a huge study showing that the household duties that women perform every day replaces exercising in the fitness center. So women who say they don't have time to go to a fitness center, so they should understand that their household duties, their chores, can easily replace exercises in the gym. Also, people with similar living standards working as bus drivers and ticket inspectors. Ticket inspectors lived longer than bus drivers, and the reason was that because they did not sit all day, they were on their feet and they interacted with people. So physical activity is a very good tool in improving emotional conditions. But if you are so much depressed you cannot even exercise, then do very, very simple things. Unfortunately, many of us were educated or brought up, or parents told us that we should do everything ourselves. We shouldn't ask for anyone for help. But this is not the right attitude. That means you will have to fly an airplane and bake bread and everything. So if you need professional advice, go get it. So well, there is a lot of information and we know a lot, but it's important to be an expert in your own field, but you cannot be an expert in all fields. Therefore, if you need a consultation of a psychotherapist, so please make good use of it. So assign different duties to other people, to doctors, delegate certain responsibilities to experts. This is important to understand and not to be shy to do this. I think it's time for the Q&A session, but before we have this, let me also speak about the physical activity a little bit more. So it's important to start by evaluating and understanding what you already have. It is important to evaluate the current condition. So a person who is depressed and who cannot get up from bed and go to the washroom, that person may think that tomorrow he or she will go to a fitness center and read a lot of books, but when he or she doesn't do it, the disillusionment is even stronger. Therefore, small steps are more important than like reading a lot of books or exercising a lot. So a good way to understand what you are capable of at a given moment, try it. So try and test it. So, and then you will develop. And also, if you are successful in this small step, you should say to yourself that you are good and that you have done an important thing for yourself. Now, questions. So please introduce yourself. My name is Svetlana. Can you hear me well? I couldn't understand the answer to the second question. Who would not be helped by antidepressants? And the second question is, serotonin, can this help treat depressions? And this is what Marshak prescribes in his clinic. And a question to Dmitry. Did you use antidepressants when you were recovering from depression? So the first question is, who would not be helped with antidepressants? So this is, well, antidepressants are prescribed by indication. If there are indications, antidepressants could help, could be prescribed. So if one antidepressant doesn't help, another one should be selected and recommended. Well, yes, you may rely on antidepressants, but do not forget about psychotherapy. Psychotherapy can be different. It can be very targeted. So an expert can select the right therapy to be efficacious. As far as depression is concerned, depression may go away sooner or later. Well, there are depressions that may continue throughout your life. But what are the major risks? Suicide, wasting of time, and relationships. So depression may end by itself, but with professional assistance, you may be able to get rid of depression sooner. Of course, every specific case is different, and we never know how long depression may last. Well, depression may end spontaneously and may not. Well, Nicholas Christakis, who spoke today, he has a great book called Tied with... It is called Connected in English.
What he's famous for, he demonstrated that the mood can be transferred in the network, obesity can be transferred in the networks, and our well-being mainly depends on the social environment we are in. It is like programming what is happening to us. It's programming our thoughts, our language, how we make our choices. Neuroeconomy is really based on that, because a human being, the things which we call free will, these are more of a socio-biological mechanism which define what's happening with us. From that perspective, the observations which I have in my practice and in my life show that a person who is coming to a complicated psychological situation, psychiatric situation, he has a destroyed social body, so to say. If we get too deep into the sphere of relations, you can find many parallel things going hand in hand. And I have to say, by supporting my colleague, that first of all, you have to remove the negative effect. But you have to act in all levels at the same time, move parallel to that. When we speak about clinical depression, where the risk of suicide is quite high, we deal with such patients only with psychiatric colleagues. Parallel to that, my goal is, and my purpose is, to social demeanor restoration of a human being, to create an environment, an understanding for him where he can transform his current surrounding and create the environment of openness and contact day by day without overloading it, and use special environment of school as a safety pillow, both with my assistance and assistance from other experts. This complex approach really gives good results, as it was done. When you isolate some components, or when recently I faced a horrible case in YouTube, one psychiatric, I will not even give the sex of this human being, showed how he or she withdrew a guy from a very deep depressed situation, like a stunning situation, and then left him there. There's no doing like that. A person has to have some social support. If you give a person some warmth, some close contact, you have to take care of what is going to happen later, his social economic environment, how it's going to change, what's going to happen in this context. That's why I'm in favor of integral and complex approach. I think that yes, and in Moscow, inter alia, we would like to implement it in the healthcare factor, because now social and healthcare factors are separated. So, summing it all up, antidepressants will help to those who deal with psychotherapy. The second question about serotonin. As for serotonin, you know, speaking frankly, I have never faced some major researches that serotonin injection of serotonin can prevent depression, because we're not speaking about abstract serotonin, but serotonin and intersynaptic. If we speak about psychological problem, we're speaking about many other monoamines. And serotonin degrades in the digestive system and does not get into the blood flow. 5-hydroxytryptamine are the predecessors of serotonin. That's a different story, but if we speak about some pharmacorrection of condition, I think it should be done only with a professional. You know, it's at least, as minimum, it's an exterior factor which can probably prevent you from getting an addict, because it's really easy to get there. Did you get from depression with antidepressants? So you, please, you have a question. Elena Mironova, psychologist, neuropsychologist. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. I agree with everything, but the question is the following. You say it's wonderful, both the environment, activity, everything is helping, psychotherapy, but the reality is, as usual, that the referring group, the majority of our clients, are not the gentlemen who are reading the lectures or some books. This is internet, and influencers do not basically have some psychotherapy knowledge in the sphere of psychotherapy or medical knowledge. Very often client is worried about some celebrity's mood much more than I will try broadcast to her. So, and what's the question? What should we do with that? Because comparing yourself with very often the depression becomes the reason of depression is comparing yourself to what is broadcasted by the main platform, which is internet and Instagram. What should we do with that? How can we fight that, struggle that? How can we fight Instagram? Well, you want an expert as an expert? Well, Instagram won. So let me finish in this case. On my point of view, Mikhail, you're doing a lot for our professional union of psychologists. You have showed a psychologist with humane face, not as scary to go to psychologist or psychiatric expert. Because stigmas are really strong, and it's really hard to start addressing something with the word psycho, with the root psycho. Nevertheless, what we should do with that, because very often the depressed patients do not reach the moments to do so, to act accordingly. If you're speaking about about a social aspect, not as a piece of advice, a social responsibility, I would lay this responsibility to the people you're talking about, because they are grown-up people mainly. teenagers and children as a different group of people, but the grown-up people, and if they are worried about celebrity, some certain celebrity, more than about themselves, well, let them go where they're going, because once it becomes significantly bad and painful, and when it hurts, they start thinking about themselves more. But it does not exclude self-dependence and research of these tools, because internet and telecommunication are also certain tools, because I was overcoming certain barrier to start using this social media. On the one hand, it is a channel of delivery of information, channel of communication. You have to treat it as an objective reality of today, accepting and acknowledging it all, that this is the reality that we live in. And then you have to adapt to itself, to it, and to use these channels from the positive perspectives. And unfortunately, part of people will drain in this internet, in the Instagram. And I think, as for the experts, the principle is really important, because we are thinking globally, acting locally. As for every human being, you have to figure out your sphere of activity, sphere of responsibility, whether you can influence something, because this round table is an attempt to influence the situation without expecting that it would change without this specific separate element. We're doing what we can. And if you communicate with your relatives, with your clients, you are making really positive change, and it is much more positive, much more significant if we think more and do more. Thank you. I would like to ask, my name is Yuri, I would like to ask Dmitry, to me, to you. How would you define your depression, the depression of 1 year? Thank you for your question. You know, I want to say that I have fundamental scientific education, that's why, and I was pathological physiology. I was a teacher of pathological physiology. That's why I have special attention on stigmatization of condition on the level of diagnosis. That's why I perceive a person not as a diagnosis. I can tell it to you right now, but as a composition of certain typical sub-physiological processes. That's why, from this perspective, it seems to me that we very often make mistakes stigmatizing this condition, but this is a subject for a more profound and more professional discussion. That's why, strictly speaking, diagnosis as a depression, I've never had it when I went to the doctor, and if I'm thinking every day what should I do, and I'm getting to a situation in my life and I'm thinking that it's finally over, it ended up with a very severe poisoning because I wanted to kill myself, taking some pills, and that's why subconsciously I started to do certain steps in this direction, and all the symptoms, which I basically knew from the course of psychiatry, which Professor Zharikov was given to us, more profound way, but I understood it in a more profound manner, but I did not insert in some certain model. I don't like models, basically. Models are needed for medical and economic standards, to get some statistics, to elaborate clinical recommendations. It's a sort of a language which we experts and patients' environments use to communicate. These are certain images, but these are not realities. The reality, objective reality, does not exist. There are certain words which we use to describe certain conditions. Can I add a few words? Maybe I can answer you personally. Just let's move to a different person. Good afternoon. My name is Gleb. I am geriatric. And I would like to ask you about safety of drugs. It's a world trend. And for example, a person is taking antidepressants, and he can have develop negative medical reactions. How do you follow it? How do you monitor it? And how do you react if you ever react? And I'd like to say once more, my focus is psychotherapy, cognitive demeanor. But I have fundamental education and experience of pharmacotherapy prescription, and every expert follows the pharmacotherapy side effects, because if you do this medication on your own, ignoring side effects can lead to a negative consequence and unreadiness to them, obviously. That's why correlation between drugs, between medicine is also bear in mind. And there are formal criteria as well that most of medicine, theoretically speaking, the age group is one age group. And what should we do with a different age group? Because pharma companies are writing their prescriptions from the perspective of legal safety, not to be sued. And the direct answer is yes, it is considered. An expert study on so. And a short question. Yesterday I registered for the social media for patients, and I made selective depression, and I saw 1,200 people with selective depression, for example, there. And it's a mass psychotherapy. Every human being is sharing his worries, his concerns during the day. What do you think? Is it a good experience, positive experience, when you see that other people are living through something, or it's a negative one, as in social media, as the researchers were, the sensation, the feelings of human being were evaluated? It depends on the personality. If he has some dogmas that my life should be better than of all those damn losers, then he compares himself with the damn losers. If I'm like them, I'm the one of them, and he can get even more depressed. Even if his dogmas of his personality are related to that, oh, I'm not alone, there are many of us, and that doesn't make me a bad person, then it would help this guy. That would help this person. I would add a few words to that. It depends on the content which exists in this group, because this group can have obviously supportive character to bring people up, and can sink him. On the contrary, when a person was describing, I was trying this medicine for 20 times and it never helped. Same problems with fora. You understand this person never took this medicine, and the diagnosis is probably like that. But other people who read that affects them as a blast. It's a catastrophe. Nothing's going to help me. So, well, as an idea, theoretically, is wonderful, but it can be implemented in a different manner. And I would like to add from that we have gigantic, huge experience in that, and we have two social networks, social media. One is for communicative skills, and the second one is for health management. And Christakis was really good at that in his speech. He showed graphite, the diamond. He says the molecules are the same, the atoms, the links are different. The same parallel was done with the social system. People can be the same, but the setting which is introduced into this network, from the goals which are followed, the principles and value of communication which exist in this network, or the content which is in place, and the practice which is used, a lot depends. And for example, you can take some totalitarian belief or a Buddhist community. Basically, the effect will be absolutely opposite. In that case, it's a group of people. So it depends what people are going to do, and you should consider what projects will be done. People start sharing their concerns, their fears and worries in certain environment. It's an extremely powerful instrument. So it is important to have some conditions prescribed for that. There should be a very specific setting. Without setting, can be not safe. In this context, people come and say, "Well, I'm sharing my worries and I'm paying money for that. Why I will go to Facebook to share my worries there," and then that's when the payback comes. Well, generally there are some nuisances, and there is a story, quite a positive story, when you stood up and said, "I'm a geriator." I said, "Oh, all right. Hello, my name is Mitch, and I'm an alcoholic." Was going in parallel. Thank you. Next question. Thank you. Let's make it the last question, because we're running short of time. I'd like to find out what's your point of view about public or state-owned psychoneurological clinics. What assistance can be provided to people who cannot afford the private medical practice? If it's free of charge, paid by the government, does it help the psychotherapy if people turn to them? I'll just do it in a couple of words. Do not wait that it would help from the first visit. Just allow yourself to visit it many times. It might help. And there are experts in our free city service and in the medical organizations, but don't be too euphoric about that. Don't create an ideal image out of an expert you address to. And I have a part I would like to add. I have a part of working as a teacher, as a trainer, as a coach, and I face experts. I used to meet experts who work in some public spaces, and I think that you should use resources which are available, and not to limit yourself to the resources which are unavailable to you to this or that reason. So I would like to add that I, as a person who is traveling a lot worldwide and around the country, I must say that in Moscow, free medical assistance is one of the best worldwide, and it is available, and you can compare it with Asian countries. Guys, there is nothing like that, at least close to that. That's why it's in place, and it is clear that some things might be many times higher, but this resource must be used, and we should be thankful for having that in place. Thank you. Well, I think that those who have questions remaining can come up personally and ask them. Thank you so much. Thank you indeed for your attention.